We're supposed to be on at 2:30, but trying to wrangle everybody to get these things going can be a little thing. Also, trying to get some of this guy's time, he's like a ghost. He's a legend. This is Chase Perry. If anybody's never met him, he is the founder builder of East Coast Gear Supply. Probably, in my opinion, humbly, one of the best axle builders and knowledgeable guys across a lot of different things, whether it's Toyota, Jeep, military, whatever it is, right? Like, you do it all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hand this off to you to kind of walk through specs on all these builds. Every time we build a new car, Chase hates us because we call him and ask for axles. But then they're done. And then he loves them until we break them or not break them. And he's gonna show you why we don't break them as often as we used to with all these new parts he's coming out with that I think are kind of revolutionary because some of these things have never been out before, right?
Yeah, we've basically made improvements to, what's been around for a long time. So this is a YJ, isn't it?
This is
it
a
a TJ?
TJ. Yep, it's all stretched out.
Yep.
All the moto built stuff. We got Rico over here blocking traffic for us. But we have 14s front and rear on this.
Yeah, 14 bolts. So our 14 bolt casting, obviously the 14 bolt's been around for, 40 years or something.
Yeah.
Everybody loves it. Very strong axle. The OE casting was a little weak, very porous, and the ground clearance on it wasn't great. So we designed a new casting that's pre-shaved. You can fit a full ring gear in it or a shaved ring gear, but this one has the full ring gear in it. It's obviously stronger if you run the full ring gear, but the way we've designed the casting, it's shaved on the bottom, and it's got one of the best ground clearance, certainly for the ring gear size of 10.5. It's got the third pinion bearing support, so just a super strong axle. And he chose to do a steering 14 bolt in the front. A lot of guys opt for the high pinion 60. We have our own high pinion 60, high clearance casting. And then the rear is 40 spline. It's forged spindle, very heavy wall. The bearing separation is very wide, and all that translates into strength. And our spindle yields at 80,000 pounds, where like a normal 1-ton spindle is 20,000 pound yield. So, your stock 14 bolt, a lot of guys will bend spindles. A lot of buggies with stock 14 bolts, we'll sell them chromoly shafts, and when we do, they're like, it won't go in. I'm like, yeah, your spindle's bent. Yeah. And so we came out with the 40 spline kit. A lot of stuff in the market is very expensive when you get into 40 spline, but everything we did is very high production, high run, highly engineered, highly designed to be economical and essentially unbreakable. So
Gotcha.
We've yet to lose a 40 spline rear shaft. We've been selling them for 8 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of things to note on this is you build a lot of bouncer, you build a lot of things, right?
Sure.
But when we're taking 40 spline, 14s, 80s, 60s, whatever they are, whether they're front steer, rear steer, whatever they are, the problem that I face and that you've often heard me talk about is when I'm off the trail, right? Yep. The durability and usability of driving this big heavy rig with spools, because you want a spool or a grizzly or something like that can hold up on the trail. Cyclable lockers are great, but I like something that's more constant. The thing about what you're building with your new C's is your hubs. So can you kind of explain what you've done there with the manual hubs?
Yeah, so the 40 spline rear was like one thing. We did that a long time ago, 8 years ago. About 2 years ago, we developed the Kingpin 540, and it's a big Kingpin C. We don't really use ball joints, which a lot of guys have converted to ball joints, which you can make a big enough ball joint and whatever, but the Kingpin's always going to be stronger. Serviceability is, I believe, better. It lasts longer. And at the end of the day, ball joints are a lot easier to assemble, and from like a manufacturing cost, it's a lot less than the Kingpin. But once you pay for it once, it's very simple to replace and very cheap to put a new Kingpin bushing in or a lower bearing. So that's one thing. We're a big proponent of the Kingpin. What we did on this new Kingpin, like the old Kingpin stuff, Kingpin access inclination wasn't great, so scrub radius wasn't great. We increased the Kingpin inclination. We moved the mounting flange back to give you better scrub radius. But also with that, we did the locking hub. It's a 40 spline, 4340 Ford shaft. We have hundreds and hundreds of them. So if anyone was to ever break it, you just call me, we send you a new one, it's all warranted stuff. Whereas again, a lot of the 40 spline stuff on the market is like exotic. It's two-piece, it's this, it costs $600. Our stub shafts are affordable, and we're trying to build an economic, 40 spline package that more than the top 5% can afford. So, and that's our MO, is we try to build axles that more people can afford, but you're not sacrificing quality or strength. It's not exotic anymore, because when we design and engineer, we go to a production run of 500 pieces and we bring that cost way down. And that's what we're all about, is trying to bring the cost down. We're not trying to have the most expensive axles. We're trying to have the best axles on the market. And I don't want to be the most expensive. I want more people to be able to run them. So, you've got a lot of builds here that are pretty advanced builds. Full everything you have here is full hydro. But we've got Kingpin 60s for your JLs, JKs, all that stuff that have traditional steering on it that are better for the street. And being able to go on road and off road. The market has changed a lot in the last 10 years, where people used to buy like a Toyota truck and they'd go beat it up in the woods for 10 times a year. And now people are buying brand new JL, putting big tires on it. A lot of guys are doing motor swaps, and they want to drive them 15,000 miles a year, but they also want to go beat it at Moab. And so it's really like a new market where it has to be very, very strong.
It's an enthusiast-driven market now, instead of like a hobbyist-driven market, I would say.
Yeah. There's two, you shock loading stuff and beating on it in the woods. It has to be strong for that reason, shock load strength. But also what I think people don't understand is putting miles on a vehicle is a lot of wear and tear. So, when you start getting into a 14 bolt and the 80, big carrier bearings, big ring and pinions, and all that, it won't build so much heat when you're running with these huge tires, on the street at 80 miles an hour. So everything we've done over the last 15 years is just make everything bigger and better, because that's what people are doing. I mean, 42s is like the new tire size, right?
Yeah,
it's
100%.
It's not 35s anymore.
So to kind of touch on base on what he's talking about, I almost got a little bit lost, but he has a good way of talking about it. When he's talking about his Kingpin redesign and the scrub radius, the way to explain that to you is if you've ever been off-roading and you watch yourself or your friend and they have a tire like this and they're turning, and that tire is getting into their frame, is getting into their stuff, or it's getting into the front of their bumper, that's the overall scrub radius on the tire itself. So what he's doing is he's sucking that in so that it makes a cleaner, tighter scrub radius, like a Baja race truck would, so that you're not getting into the body, you're not getting into the suspension, and that's a good thing to do. Now, luckily with Mickey Thompson, with a lot of their bigger stuff they're coming out with, is a 1350, not a 1450. So you have the ability to not get into that as much with using a more offset wheel to keep yourself off brake calipers and things like that, which are a really cool thing to do. Now, some of the other reasons I like your guys' stuff, I would say more than others, is because a lot of your parts, when it comes to like factory seals, factory stuff, you can get that stuff relatively easy. Your 40 spline stuff, you're not really ever gonna break. And that's stuff you have to get from you, but like regular O-rings, things like that, all of these are built off of OEM axles. These are not junkyard axles. Like a lot of people think to me like, oh, you're just doing junkyard axles. No, these are highly designed axles that just use OEM fitment and OEM styling because of the practicability and the cost of it. That's really it. But there's efficiency, there's design, there's all these things that you've taken the time to do to make them more performance driven. The other thing that I really like about a lot of the stuff you do is when you design something, you care about pinion angle, you care about caster. You don't just pop out 50,000 axles and go, here you go, this is what you get. Every time we build a set of axles, you're like, so what are we doing for pinion angle on this? What are we doing for caster on this? So when you order a set of axles from East Coast Gear Supply, you can custom, design them to that. So when you're ready to call these guys, just make sure you have all the information. Also, pre-call them. Call them and say, what information do I need to be able to figure this out? Because here's what I want to do. Is this the best axle? I think it's funny, he calls me a YouTuber all the time and a social media guy, and I am, but I'm also a builder and I love doing this stuff. But he has a valid point. A lot of people will jump into this world and they'll say, hey, I want an 80 with a lunchbox locker because I think it sounds cool. No, you don't want that. But it's not because they don't know, you know, I mean, it's just because they haven't experienced it. And experience in off-road is something that you have to learn. You can't buy it, right? And you're going to learn it very fast when you're broken on a trail somewhere in the middle of nowhere and you're walking home. So listen to what these guys are doing, talk to them, and they'll give you a lot of information. The other cool thing is a lot of off-road places, just automotive in general, you'll call and you'll usually grab a salesman or something like that kind of has an attitude. That doesn't want to deal with some idiot client or something, doesn't know what he's doing. Like, you got to make a sale and get off the phone. You don't get that. The culture at your place is really cool. We're like, no, I'd rather have this conversation with you once and never have to have it again. And it might be a little bit longer of a conversation, but we're going to educate you a little bit. And then next time you call, we're not going to have that conversation because you're going to know. And I like that about you guys, where it's like you'll give them that benefit of understanding. So let's move over to Rock Buggy and kind of show what we did over there. All right, so this is Rock Buggy. This is actually, I think, one of the first big builds we did with you. That was like the first ones, right?
You tricked me into, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Love it. So, what I like the most about these is I was coming off of my first gridlock build, and those are junkyard axles, right? You threw me an 80 in there to get my front end fixed. That worked amazing. I finally realized what bias weight is, getting that weight up front, getting it hooked over something, and doing that. When we got into this build, we started talking about different carriers, different traction devices, splines, all that kind of stuff. Now, why I think this one is probably the most practical build for spools is because it's kind of built in the styling of like a moon buggy, right? But really explain to us the difference of why a spool is so much stronger than, let's say, like a Grizzly or a zip locker or an ARB or something like that, right? Like things that people are more known. Now, again, you can't run a spool in your everyday car. Yeah. It's going to throw traction issues, ABS issues, all that kind of stuff. But I think what people don't understand is when they hear spool, they think it's probably a lot more technical of a device than like a air locker or something like that is if they're new to the scene. Sure. But if they're not, they understand what it is. It's actually a more simple device, right? Yeah. So kind of walk us through traction devices and like usually what you prefer to see on vehicles on the things you do.
Well, it all depends, what the build is. Obviously, if you want to be, street and off-road, you're going to want to go to something selectable like an ARB. If it is strictly off-road and you want to limit, failures and failure points, then the spool is keep it simple, stupid. It's a chunk of, forged steel that's heat treated, and you can't break it.
Yeah.
So whereas an ARB, you're looking at a forged or a cast case, because there's some working pieces and a lot of internals, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Spider gears can break. There's a locking collar that slides over internally, that they can wear from locking and unlocking, so you can try to get slippage. Same with like an E-locker, although we don't have E-lockers for the 14 bolt. So if you're building something that is strictly off-road and you can stand a spool, which if you have full hydro, I would say you can stand a spool. You told me you couldn't, but then you were like, yeah, okay.
What I said was I go to a lot of shows and events, and I feel bad. You should have seen us pulling this thing in here. Every time we moved it 2 feet, the flooring was like, goodbye, goodbye. So that's what I'm saying with that. But to the average guy who's going out there and wheeling and not really worried about this, right?
Sure.
What I think the thing that helped me understand a spool was when he says keep it simple, stupid, that's like an old military term we use. Now, what it is a solid chunk where your axles come in, your rings attached to it, and everything just moves together. When you're looking at any type of E-locker, air locker, anything like that, they typically have some actuated devices in them, some machining things going on that have to work together in unison to lock and unlock things. Sometimes those get stuck, sometimes those get stuck open, sometimes they get unplugged. There's a lot of things that can happen with them that can go wrong. Spools are like always on. You can't turn them off. There's no disconnect. There's no nothing there. Once it's there and it's all bolted in, it ain't changing until you take it out. And so that's where it's one of those things where you're not typically going to break it because it's always engaged. You never have that chance. But also it's just one piece design where there is no secondary parts that have a failure or something like that.
Yep.
Okay.
You could rip an airline off, your air compressor breaks, or if you're running off a tank, you run out of air and you're, 15 hours from home and you're really upset, you're open.
Now, we talked a little bit about pinion and caster, but let's talk about widths, right? I know that all three of these have different widths on them.
Sure.
So when we're ordering stuff from you, or anyone's ordering stuff from you, I think what's the widest axle we've sold? It was the one guy who bought.
We did like 78 or something
78,
ridiculous. Yeah.
And like to put that in perspective, these are like I think this is 72.
Yeah.
No, I think this one's like 72 or 74.
It might be 74. Yeah.
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 But we sold a set of 78, so he has the capability of building it as wide as you want,
Sure.
which, like, you can get ridiculously wide. And it's not really the best thing all the time because I feel like I'm really wide on stuff, but that does help in some situations. Like if you're building a full-size OBS and you want to do trailing arms in the rear, well, hey, a wider axle with a tighter backspace wheel might be really good for you. So things like that, or ways you can call you guys, Toyotas, all that kind of stuff for crawlers. So that kind of summarizes these. These were, I think, the prototype 14-bolt shapes we
Correct.
did.
Yeah, this was our first 14-bolt castings.
And then these offer both a full-size ring and pinion and a shaved ring and pinion for height and size.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Now let's go look at the last one we just did. This is my favorite so far.
We built this one crooked.
Yeah. So they didn't put the C's on this one straight. All right, so this is the new gridlock. It's called Altero. A lot of people are asking this. Question is yes, this is a whole new gridlock. The other gridlock is sitting back at home right now. We are going to do some more work on that. I might need an axle for it, but it's not going to be rear steer on the rear though. So this is a rear steer and front steer 80, right? 4-inch tube, half wall, your C's inner outer, 40 spline lockouts up front, slugs in the rear, and we have spools in this.
Yeah.
Yep. So with all that said, this was probably my easiest install of axles I've ever done in my life. And it was that way because we did a deal with MotoBuilt and we had these shipped to Dan and Hunter right after you were done with them. And they actually built all of the truss systems for the steering, for the hydro, for everything. And I think we're doing more of that with them so that you have a more off-the-shelf kit for people when they call and they want to do stuff like that. And that's one of the things that, what I think is cool is, although you've been in the industry for how long?
18 years.
18 years.
Yep.
So 18 years, this guy's been sitting here building cool stuff. And now all of a sudden you have a situation where MotoBuilt is starting to get really into this and you pick up the phone and you're like, hey, let's do cool stuff together for people and make it easy and economical for them so that everybody can have a good time.
Yep.
Right? But when we build things like this, explain your ETAs, explain your timelines, things like that on average. Like obviously things are going to change, but I don't think that people understand how fast you guys can actually turn axles around. I think they're thinking 6 to 7 months on stuff.
It gets cut in a bandsaw, it goes in a CNC to get machined to go in the castings. Then it goes to a press, and then it goes to the fixture table to get welded, and then it goes to assembly, and then it gets washed, and then it gets painted. And you've never been, you need to come to our place, but we've got it laid out to where it moves. So, you call, and once we have the specs, it'll move through our shop in 3 to 4 days. And so a lot of times there's a wait line to get you going, but start to finish, this axle's built from scratch in 4 to 5 days. And so, lead times certainly during COVID got long, mainly because of material things, but from the actual work perspective and our materials that are very good right now, in addition to us doing more and more of our own casting C's, knuckles, we're in complete control of our supply chain and not relying on, maybe somebody else.
And you're based in North Carolina.
Correct.
So everything's US, right?
Yep.
Like everything you're doing. And let's talk about coatings for a minute. So last few months we've been working some deals and doing some stuff. So I'm a marketing guy. I'm always looking to market. I'm always looking to connect brands and do things like that. So we had this idea. If you're someone who ends up on this side of it, and you've got axles, you've got things that you're building and you're attaching them to things, well, not like the mounts, you might want to put those on yourself and not have you guys do it, right? You might just want a bare axle. Problem is, you're not going to send out a bare axle not painted.
Yeah, we don't like to.
Yeah. So they're usually in transit, what, a week?
Yeah.
So my thought was, hey, what if we offered Steal It, right? And be the first axle company to actually have Steal It as an offer on these. So now we actually have Steal It with you. And so when you call, don't worry about it. So when you call and you have an axle being built, you can request Steal It. I think it's coming in like 4 or 5 colors now that you can get.
3?
Yeah. No, you're good. Chase will do anything. He's good. So anyways, but you have, I think mainly we're doing black, gray, and charcoal, like the 3 we're doing. But the nice thing is about Steal It is you can fully weld to it. You don't have to clean the axle or do anything first. You need to wipe it down. But you don't have to grind anything or do anything. You can do it, throw your next coat of Steal It over it, and call it a day. And for anybody who's actually installing these axles, welding that stuff, putting trusses on, doing all that work, they understand how much time and cleanliness that saves them, where they're not having to sit in there for days with bandsaw or band sanders and all that stuff, belt sanders, trying to clean everything just to get good welds and get good stuff. Because if you're building stuff at this level, you're gonna want good welds because it ain't gonna hold up long. Correct. And to what you were saying earlier, you know, with twisting C's and stuff, man, there was a few times that I was out on the trail with people that had junkyard axles, 14 bolts, and you just watch their entire center go, you know what I mean, and just rotate, and their tires go the opposite way when they back up. And it sucks, you know what I mean, because you're out and you're done. You're out and you're done, you know what I mean, for the day. And you know what I mean, and now you're thousands of dollars and probably fixing other things that may or may not have broken.
Sure, rip a coil over off.
Yeah, and then now all of a sudden you're out for a month.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you guys care that much about it. So do you have anything else cool coming down the pipeline?
I don't know. I mean, our value add is building what you want, but giving you a platform that we've engineered and try to bring the cost down. So, you know, he was talking about different widths. You know, pinion angle, caster, like whatever you want, whatever you're building, that's our value add. It's not like, here, buy this, it comes in a box. It's, what do you want us to build for you? And obviously there's some parameters there, but we've tried to, you know, create systems that works for everybody. You know, we can do 44 fronts and rears, 60 front and rear, 14 bolt front and rear, 80. So it's just, you know,
figuring out what they want.
Yeah, what level are you going to go to, we can build for you.
100%. But at the same time, it's like you're hearing them, whatever they need when they're ordering that, right? And you're kind of giving it to the way they want, not telling them how they want their steak done. But you're also like, hey, this is some good seasoning you can throw on that steak if you want to. It's a little bit better. You may not have had it. And that comes down to like the widths and things like that, where when someone says, I want a 78-inch wide axle, and you're like, yeah, so do you realize what a shaft's going to cost for that? You thought about that, you know, type thing. So it's cool to have someone on that side of the phone that is an enthusiast. We've had him out. We've had him wheeling. And I think your comment to us was, man, y'all actually will. How do you keep these rigs looking so nice?
A lot of armor all.
Exactly, right? Well, anyways, if you have any comments, you have any questions for Chase or myself, make sure you drop in the comment below. We're going to be talking about more stuff this week. Probably going to need another axle for good luck when we get done.
Credit card.
All right. Got anything else?
That's it.
All right. Make sure you check out eastcoastgearsupply.com for all your axle needs, whether it's a Jeep, Yoda, full size, bouncer, crawler, anything. I mean, you got about everything handled. And again, a lot of the stuff he said, they manufacture themselves now, and it might be based off of that Dana 80 housing, but it's your housing now.
We've made it better.
Yeah.
High clearance, thicker, you know.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for everybody tuning in. Catch you guys on the next one.